Welcome to the Brute Strength Podcast, bringing you worldwide experts from all areas of health and fitness. We cover training, nutrition, coaching, and mindset. Welcome your host, strength and conditioning coach, 2012 and 2013 CrossFit Games champ, Michael Cazue. Mind, body, brute.
Hey, and welcome back. My name is Mike Cazue, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. I am so fired up about this one. I've got David Goggins on the show today. I've followed David for the last couple years. I think I heard him for the first time on the Joe Rogan show. And he's got an absolutely insane story, one of the most inspiring guys I've ever heard, and he may be the toughest man alive. On the show today, we talk about his experience growing up in an abusive household at the hands of his father, Trueness, growing up in extreme poverty and racism, getting held up at gunpoint. And then we talk about the turning point in his life in which he joined the Air Force. He goes on to qualify for the Air Force, he gets out, and then he balloons up to 300 pounds. Then we talk about the story of him transforming his life yet again and becoming a Navy SEAL and literally one of the baddest men in the history of the U.S. military. This guy has got so many vivid, incredible stories, and over, he's overcoming obstacles that all of us can relate to. And he talks about the specific ways that he sharpened his mind and developed himself into the toughest man in history. He's got a new book out called Can't Hurt Me. It's incredible. This is one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done, and I know you guys will love it. Before we get started, if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button, share this with a friend. Enjoy the show. David Goggins, what an honor, man. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. I want to start out. I want to give a shout out to my good friend, Bruce Pitcher. He's the one that really pushed me to try to get an interview with you in the first place. And before that, I thought you were one of those guys that was just completely out of reach. And he said, man, this is my idol. You got to get him on the show. And just a little bit about this guy. He lost 200 pounds in a year. He was on ABC's Extreme Weight Loss. And over the past 5 years, he's also achieved some incredible things. And you've become an idol to not only him, but a lot of people that have gone through extreme hardships in their life, but also just average Joes and Janes that want to accomplish more in life. And so I'm just honored to be on the show with you. I've looked up to you for years, and I'm stoked to have the chance to get to talk to you, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I really appreciate that. I'm glad I can help people out through my story.
So they call you the toughest man alive. Do you agree with that? And if not, who do you think is the toughest man alive?
You know, growing up, I was the weakest person in the world, I thought, in my mind. And the most important conversation is the one you have with yourself. So when you think that, it becomes truth. I do believe now there's not many people on the planet who can do what I do. I don't do it for money. I don't do it for fame. I don't do it for a professional sport. I don't do it for a trophy. I don't know many people who get up and get after it like I do on a daily basis for absolutely nothing. No one sees me. No one knows me. No one knows half the shit I do on a daily basis. And I don't know of anybody who would do it for nothing, just for nothing, just for pure fact of I'm trying to get harder and tougher mentally and physically every day of my life. So I got to say me.
So a big part of your story starts when you were a kid and you suffered an enormous amount of abuse at the hands of your father, Trueness. Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, Trueness. Yep.
Trueness. And I know a lot of kids that are in that type of situation, an abusive relationship, they feel like there's something wrong with them, and they take on the responsibility rather than putting it on the perpetrator. And I didn't pick up on any of that in your story. However, when did you realize that you were living an abnormal childhood?
You know what? You don't know how abnormal it is until you start to hang around kids. Like, so I didn't go to school that much. You know, we worked a skating rink when I was growing up. My dad didn't believe too much in going to school. So, but the few times I did go to school, that's when I started realizing, man, that these kids weren't working all night skates at 7, 6, 7, 8 years old. We're working all night skates, and all night skate is like on Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and a couple other days during the year. There would be these times where my dad would say, we're going to have an all night skate. And it was a 24-hour skate where the skating rink would open up at like 11 o'clock in the morning, and it would shut down at 11 o'clock the next day. And we would be working that all day. And I'm a young kid. And I worked the skating rink and a bar, every single night pretty much. And then the bar would shut down at 4 o'clock a.m. And I would arrive at school the times we went, if it wasn't too late, for me to get to school. And I'd get to school and I'd just be passed out. And all these other kids were playing in the playground and all this other crap. I'd be in the corner just knocked out. And I started realizing through talking to friends, man, they weren't doing this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I realized, man, my dad was a sadistic man to have me out here doing this at such a young age, and how he treated my mom and my brother and myself was just another level.
So I know there's a ton more to this story, but just in the interest of time, why did you end up eventually leaving? Why did you and your mom and your brother eventually leave?
Well, my mom finally got the courage. She lived with this man for 17 years. So before I was born, 9 years before I was born, she was with this guy, and then another 8 after I was born. But the incident that happened was my dad beat us on a constant, every day. He would get drunk, and when he got drunk, he got violent. So he had a lot of self-esteem issues, I believe. I had to go back in and do a live autopsy on this guy to kind of move through my life. I had to kind of figure this guy out, and we'll get to that later. But what happened was my mom saw my dad cheating in the office of Skateland. He was on the couch, and this is the kind of guy that he didn't hide his cheating. He was this old school pimp pretty much. And, he ran prostitutes from Canada back to New York, and he didn't give a shit, basically. And my mom walked in the office and caught my dad, having sex with this lady on the couch. And so that ended up in a big, big fight. And when we got home, it was like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, I forget how late it was or how early it was. My mom was on top of the stairs, and my dad knocked her out pretty much. And he drug her down the stairs by her hair. And I jumped on my dad. I was like 8 years old, jumped on my dad. And the beating I got that day, I don't think the beating my mom got messed her up, because she was so used to all these things and her mind was messed up. That the beating I got, though, I believe changed her life, because I was hiding in my bedroom under the covers. And when she pulled the covers back, I remember seeing her face. In her face, like, what am I doing to my kids? So a couple of days later, we were sitting at the kitchen table, and my dad was talking to another one of his girlfriends. And she came downstairs, and she looked at me and my brother, and she said, "Hey, you guys can go, you guys can stay, but I'm getting the fuck out of here." And she just broke. And when she broke, we moved to that small town in Brazil, Indiana. And that's when another nightmare began for me.
So I know that from reading the book that she had wanted to leave for years before, but your dad had manipulated and kind of brainwashed her into thinking that she couldn't survive without him, and into believing that she had no skills, that she could go out and make money and support you guys. So what happened after that? That must have been an incredibly scary period of time for all of you. What happened after that?
So my dad did a great job of brainwashing my mom. And you know what's fucked up, man? She's 71 years old, and she's very successful right now. My dad still owns a part of her soul. Like, she's successful, makes great money. She helps a lot of people out. And when she's alone with me and we're talking, I can tell that, my God, man, like you are so far removed from this guy. I mean, he's dead now, and you're still living there. So only imagine, she's 71 now. She left when she was 36, had no education, had nothing. So imagine how fucked up her brain was at 36 years old. So as an 8-year-old kid, I was dealing with this woman who was very traumatized because my dad took her soul completely. So it was a lot. That's why going to Brazil, Indiana was very rough, because she was trying to figure herself out. And my dad had took the better part of her mind. And when someone owns real estate in your mind, man, you have a hard way to go. So it was a tough challenge for her that she never got over, but she's super successful now. But that's what made my life extremely hard, because I was truly alone. And that's what made my journey so very hard.
So tell me about this little town that you moved to in Indiana. I know it was close to, or it was the kind of a Ku Klux Klan hub or near one of some sort. It was there was a lot of racism there. What was that like for you?
So it's called Brazil, Indiana. And Brazil, Indiana was near a town called Center Point, Indiana. So Center Point, Indiana was a hub of KKK. In 1995, Center Point, Indiana, that hub came down to Brazil, Indiana, which is about 12 minutes away from Brazil, Indiana. And they marched in the 4th of July parade in 1995. So what it was like for me, so having that messed up foundation from Buffalo that I had, my mom going through crap. We lived in a $7 a month place for several years. She was working 3 jobs. So not having a really stable foundation, dealing with being one of the only Black kids in this small town, it was rough. And not only that, I had a learning disability. I stuttered, patches of hair falling out, white splotches on my skin. So I looked like a daggone leopard, going through school, being the only Black kid looking like a leopard stuttering, and I was not only the only Black kid, but I was the dumbest kid in school. And I had toxic stress. I suffered from so many different issues that I tried to hide, that it just was, it was overwhelming for me at times. Overwhelming. So I developed a great skill in cheating and a great skill in lying, because of all my insecurities and shit. So it was a hard road to hoe, man.
So there were some big turning points coming up in this period of your life. And at one point, I remember you shaved your head for the first time. What was the impetus behind that?
Well, what happened there was we went to Annapolis, Indiana, and my mom met this guy. And my mom's life was starting to get better. His name was Wilmoth. And I'm sure you know about it from reading the book. Yep. He got murdered. And when he got murdered, we moved back to this small town in Brazil, Indiana. So when I moved back to Indiana, that's when the real racism happened for me. As a young kid, when you're 8, 9, 10 years old, kids don't give a crap what color you are. They don't even know any better. But when I came back, when I was like 14, 15, 16 years old, the kids started realizing this motherfucker looks way different than me. And, so I came from Annapolis, where there was a different culture there, man. I hung around a lot of Black people. You're sagging your pants. You're wearing big bomber jackets. You're everything is just different. So I created a whole new David Goggins. And when I came back to Brazil, Indiana, it was all these white people. I walked in the door of school, man. It's like the daggone music stopped. It was like this. It's like the first thuggish kid they'd ever seen. But I had developed this character, and the character was basically hiding the real insecure me. So I would develop all these different hairstyles. I did the old man hairstyle where you shave the whole top of your head and leave the whole side with hair. I did the reverse part where I shaved my whole head and I had a little piece of hair up here. I had like a little pooch of hair right here in the front. I mean, I did all kind of shit, man, that I just sit back and I think about, okay, how can I create friends, create a character, create a whole new persona, so then people would notice me, not just for my color, but notice me for this guy's just cool, he's just different. So I was going so far away from who I was and who I should have been just by creating these characters, man. So it started with just trying to get away from the scared, afraid kid I was, basically.
So at some point, your mom sent you a letter or some kind of notice from the school, and it said that you were flunking out. And up to this point, you had gone through so many things that could have been kind of the catalyst for change, but yet this was the thing that really moved you to change. What was it about the fact that you were about to flunk out of school that had you want to make a change in your life?
So I had this dream of being in the military. But I didn't know that the military, required you to be a not smart guy, but you have to have some kind of education. And I had a 4th grade reading level my junior year. So I cheated on everything, every homework assignment, every test, all through school. So when I'm sitting here and I left home for a week, my mom wanted me to come home, and I didn't want to come home. And she said, well, if you don't want to come home, you can live on your own. My mom was the kind of person that didn't put up with shit because she was such in a dark place. She didn't have that time and that patience to say, hey, David, let's talk about this. There was no talking. It was like, look, motherfucker, I'm so stressed out in my life. I just don't have time for this. So it was like, hey, come home, drop your keys off and leave. That's what I did. And I didn't go to school at all. And she got a letter from school saying, hey, your son basically is flunking out. He's missed a quarter of the school year. He's a junior and he's got a lot to make up. So when she got that letter from school, she called me and she read the letter to me. And I said, I'm going to come home and get it. She goes, no, there's no need to come home. I'm just telling you, you're going to flunk out of school. She goes, you go ahead and stay gone. But at this time, I was hungry as shit. I was hungry. I was thirsty. I was living from home to home from friends I knew. And so I used that letter as an excuse to come home to get some food. So I got the letter. I said, hey, she goes, and she put the letter on the bed. And she goes, hey, you can come home, man, but you're going to flunk out. And she just went on her way. It was like pretty much like, whatever, man. So at that time, I kind of realized I was on my own. My mom was a great person. I'm not trying to paint her in a bad light. She had a lot of shit to go through in life. And as a 16, 17-year-old man, I didn't realize that. So I never I never was mad at her about anything. But I realized that then at that time that I really fucked myself, that my life was going in a very bad direction. And a lot of people and a lot of things have driven me in my mindset to go into this dark, dark, dark hole. And I didn't want to face any of this shit. I know for me to come out of this hole, I had to face all of this shit. Being called nigger, my dad called me gay, my dad called me a faggot, you're never gonna be a man. Beating the hell out of me to the point where I just had no sense of being. All these things, learning disability, stutter, all this crap. And I knew I could get over it all. But the thing was trying to face it in the work that was gonna have to come to overcome all of these fucking different things. It was brutal to even think about it. And I got the letter. I knew I had to get the hell out of Brazil. And I knew that this is my only shot was the military. And I had to change a lot to get there. And that's when the accountability mirror came about, was after that letter. And I went and I looked in the mirror, and that's when I had the haircut. I believe I had a bald head with one little piece of hair going in the back of my head. It looked like a fucking clown, pants down to my ankles. And I just literally started just talking to myself in the mirror. Like it was me in the mirror, and it was an old crusty ass mirror. And I just started just talking to myself, but telling myself the truth. And I painted really good in my book, but yeah, that's what happened, man.
So what'd you do after that? You have this moment of accountability, and you create this new kind of ritual of the accountability mirror. How did you make the change and eventually get into the military?
Well, I realized with the learning disability, I was gonna need a lot of help. So my mom, got enough money to pay $15 a week for 1 hour for a tutor to kind of come in and help me out. So my ritual became pretty much study, work out. Study, work out. And that became my whole life. So I went from this character to a very focused person. And the only way I can learn, pretty much, even still to this day, is through repetitions. I had to put so many different reps in. It's absolutely unreal. And that's when my real work ethic began. People think it's because of my running and everything else and my weightlifting. It started with literally just trying to learn how to read and write. Mm-hmm. And I had to literally go to the store, and I bought these spiral notebooks. And we only had, like I said, an hour a week. So it would take a lot more than that to learn all of school in 6 months. I had 6 months to learn all this to pass this ASVAB test. because I failed it a few times before. So I had to get these spiral notebooks, and I literally had to write down everything repeatedly in these spiral notebooks to put it to memorization. And how I would pass these tests is I really didn't know what they were talking about during the test. I just memorized all these different formulas and equations and just, different kind of spelling words and different kind of paragraph comprehensions and all these different I memorized all this stuff. And basically, when it came time for the test, I remembered that I saw it on page 71 or 72 or 130 because I had written it down so many times and I could just recall it from that. So I literally developed a photographic memory through the kind of work I put in behind, my studies.
So there was a moment around then, I believe, that the way that you put it is that you brainwashed yourself to crave discomfort. And this was when you were held up by gunpoint. What happened?
Yeah, man. So me and my cousin, we were coming home from this party. And my cousin basically, we were walking by, well, just to back up a little bit, my grandmother told us not to go to the party. Or, it was something like, come home at a certain time. We didn't come home at a certain time. And we were like miles and miles out in Brazil, Indiana. And she said, well, no one's picking you up. So you're going to walk home. So we start walking home, and it's a trek. I mean, it's not like 2 or 3 miles, man. This is a fucking trek. So we're walking on these roads, and this truck passes us by, and they yell, nigger, outside the daggone truck. And, I had bomber jacket on. So my cousin, 23, Michael Jordan jacket. He had on a Lakers jacket, something like that. So we keep on walking. And the truck pulls around, skids on the side of this gravel. And my cousin starts to literally oh shit, what's going on? And at this time, my mentality started to change. So I went from this very scared, afraid kid to where my mentality started to change. I started to becoming a very different person mentally. And the guys got out of the car, and this one kid put a gun right to my forehead and was talking all this shit while my cousin was creeping across the street trying to get away. And I just stood there and looked at it. And they talked some shit. And I thought for sure he was going to kill me. And I didn't really give a shit. And he got in the car and took off after that. So I pretty much never saw them again.
So how did that lead to you craving discomfort?
Well, that was a small part about it. That really didn't lead me to craving discomfort. What led me to craving discomfort was a simple fact that I was always looking for the easy way out. And I knew for me to get to where I needed to go, I had to start craving discomfort. Discomfort had to start becoming my best friend because comfort led me down a road of copying, cheating, lying, whatever I could to survive. I became a survivor, and I never wanted to be a survivor. I wanted to be a person that thrived under great adversity. I got obsessed with watching Rocky, Platoon, all these kind of war movies and these different movies of people going through adversity. And I always talk about what really changed my mindset was 2 minutes and 13 seconds. And I came home one day and Rocky was on, or I think my buddy had it on at his house. He taped a whole bunch of movies and whatnot. They had these 2 VCRs and they would tape movies. And he was watching Rocky. And I was, Rocky 1 was on round 14. And I'm sitting there watching this guy who I wasn't familiar with, obviously, get knocked down. And everybody was telling him, his corner man was saying, stay down, all this stuff. And I saw the champion, who was Apollo Creed, turn around with his hands in the air like he had beaten this guy. And I saw this guy getting up, and the music and everything was just perfect. It was like the perfect storm for me. The music was very inspiring. The moment with everybody saying stay down, and he was getting up. And when I saw this guy get up, he looked like he was beat to shit. beat the shit, but he got up. And when I saw this Apollo Creed, I later found out it was Apollo Creed, turn around and see Rocky get up. All I remember was this great champion in Apollo Creed. I remember seeing his face. And not many people look at the face of Apollo Creed the way I did. I looked at it as, my God, man, this guy looks totally defeated. And he looks like defeated because he saw this guy get up. Because in that right there was what I wanted to be. So it was like 2 minutes, 13 seconds, whatever it was. That clip, that scene it became my new mental vision. Is I didn't care about winning. I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to go the distance. I wanted to have that kind of heart, that kind of character to continue getting up in life. And I realized I had to become very uncomfortable to develop that kind of mindset. I didn't want to be Rocky by any means. I just wanted to be the kind of guy that continued to fight and to continue to get up and not look for the easy way out. I wanted to find pride in myself because I saw pride in that guy, Rocky, just by getting up, just by the mere fact of getting up after getting the shit kicked out of him. And I wanted to feel that way. So that's kind of where it started for me. I wanted to feel pride.
It's crazy that that's where it all started, because you have absolutely become that guy. Of all the stories that I've heard in my life, you may be the guy that exhibits that trait more than anyone. So it's crazy that it came out of a movie.
It did. It came out of a movie. And I realized that's kind of why I share my story now, is I realized that 2 minutes and 13 seconds out of nowhere can change your life from the right person, the right time, the right setting. And hopefully, people find that 2 minutes and 13 seconds in my story, that you can do it, man. But you got to find that one thing that inspires you like there's no tomorrow.
So then you go on to qualify for, I believe, the Air Force, right?
Yeah. So I finally got in. I took the ASVAB test a few times, finally got in. And that's when the journey really began for me, man. I really started realizing, I thought I fixed myself when I was in that accountability mirror. The accountability mirror was a great start, but the good Lord is going to continue to put a lot of shit in my way through the journey. And in the Air Force, I realized how afraid of the water I was. And I went back to my old traits of lying and deceiving people. And the Air Force was a great platform for me to get started on my journey, but it definitely cost me some time, because I want to be Air Force pararescueman, which is a guy that jumps out of airplanes and save down pilots. And basically, I didn't know that during this training, what gets most people out of special operations training is the fact that they make you very, very uncomfortable underwater. I became a pretty good swimmer. I taught myself how to swim. I was a horrible swimmer, a very negative buoyant. But I taught myself how to swim. I got in this program, became one of the best guys in this program. But the water confidence became very challenging for me. Then put me underwater. I'm very negative buoyant. Then putting 16-pound weight belts on me, twin 80 tanks, just different things like that to make you very uncomfortable. It got to my head. In about 6 weeks in the program, they pulled us all out to get a physical, because they believed that we're going to go on to further training within the pararescue pipeline. And they found out I had sickle cell. And sickle cell is a blood disease that some African Americans have. Long story short, it can kill you under stressful situations. So they pulled me out of training, and this training made me very uncomfortable. So if you can always live in a very uncomfortable mindset, if you can always live very uncomfortable, it becomes part of your life. And I didn't sleep very much, but that became my life, being very uncomfortable. And when they pulled me out of being uncomfortable, and I got very comfortable for that week, when they pulled me from training due to sickle cell, I realized I never want to go back to being uncomfortable again. So I'm thinking that they're going to medically drop me from the program for sickle cell. So I'm getting kind of relaxed. My mind's getting real relaxed. This is why people don't understand the true power of being uncomfortable. When that mind gets relaxed, man, you are fucked. And I sat back getting relaxed thinking, man, I'm getting out of the program. I'm good to go. They're going to medically disqualify me from the military. I'm getting out of here. But I didn't quit. That was my big saving grace. I didn't quit. They're going to kick me out and it's not my fault. So a week later, I go back to the doc and the doc says, we're going to put you back in the training. And my fucking mouth dropped to the floor. And I was like, oh shit. So as I'm walking back to the compound to talk to my commanding officer, I'm thinking to myself, hey man, you only got about 2.5 weeks left. You can tough this out, man. You know, I was kind of rechanging my brain. Okay, man, let's get back into the suck. Let's get back into the suck. 2.5 weeks, we can do this, man. I walked back in the office and he goes, hey, I'm glad you're back in the training, man. You're a hard dude. I know there weren't hardly any blacks in the whole, you know, I was the only black in the program. So I knew that I was going to be good for the program, you know, stuff like that. And he was talking about that. And he said, but you got to start back from day one. And when I heard that, my mind wasn't strong enough to handle that. So I went back to my old ways and I said, man, I got to get the fuck out of here, man. I can't even imagine doing this again for another, you know, it's a 10-week program. And I was like, I can't do this. So I went back to my lying ways and I sat there in front of that man and I said, hey, Sergeant Lundberg, the doc wasn't for sure about what was going on. He talked about sudden death, talked about stroke, talked about heart attack due to sickle cell, and they're putting me back into training, and I don't feel real comfortable with any of this. So I made him believe me, and he got me out of training on a medical. And versus me quitting, on my record at pararescue training, it says I got kicked out of pararescue for a medical. And I knew that I lied. I knew that it was because of the water. I couldn't see myself going back to that training for another 10 weeks, going through all that water confidence and going back to the pool every single day. It's called the Cone Dome. The Cone Dome. Couldn't go back to the Cone Dome for 10 weeks and get put in that water to be uncomfortable. So I went from 175 pounds. I went to a job called TAC-P, which is a cool fucking job, but I didn't see it as a cool job because my mind was on the quitting mindset. I had the quitting mindset, and I couldn't see the greatness of TAC-P, the job I was going into, because there was no water involved in that. It was a job where you go behind enemy lines with special operations units, normal ground units, whatever. Whoever needed a TAC-P, which is a guy that controls fast movers behind enemy lines. Very high-speed job. But I had the quitting mind. I didn't see it as a high-speed job. I saw it wasn't pararescue. And I went from 175 pounds to 297 pounds in about 3 years. I started lifting weights. I started hiding myself. And I hid myself in a very big body. I hid that 175-pound man in a very big body. And I started eating a lot of food and lifting a lot of heavy weights. And I started looking very intimidating. So if I couldn't be a hard guy mentally, I was going to look very intimidating physically. And that's what happened.
One of my favorite parts about your story is that, you know, when you hear a lot of inspiring stories, it's kind of like, you know, people are going through a really hard time, then they go through this big transformation, and then there's this air of, after that, everything was great and I became super successful, and here's how you can do it too. And with yours, there are just so many moments where you hit these obstacles because life is just full of obstacles, and you get knocked down, and then just as you were saying that you got inspired by the Rocky movie, you just keep getting back up. And I love this. So you get out of the Air Force and you're working for a pest control company. I forget the name of it. It's an E word. What was that?
Yeah, Ecolab.
Ecolab. So tell me about that job, and then the night that you quit that and had another transformation in your life.
Yeah, man. So this night, so I get out of the Air Force after about 4.5 years, and I'm damn near 300 pounds, and I'm eating so much food, and we'll get to that later. But I'm lifting heavy. I'm a heavy lifter, man. I'm a power lifter. So I'm jacking some heavy weight, man, and people are afraid of how I look, which is exactly what I wanted, but I'm still a big pussy inside. So basically, I'm working from 11 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning. And I am spraying for cockroaches at your local eateries. I had the keys to the places, the alarm systems. I'd go in by myself, spray for cockroaches, steal their food, eat their brownies and shit, whatever it was, and spray for cockroaches at nighttime. And I would spray down Steak and Shake was my last stop. I sprayed down Steak and Shake, and I would get a large chocolate milkshake. I had a 45-minute commute home. And I would get these, I'd go across the street and get these boxes of mini donuts from 7-Eleven, mini chocolate donuts. I believe it was 7-Eleven. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. And I would drive home 45 minutes. I'd eat these box of donuts, and I would drink this chocolate milkshake. And when I get home, I would turn the TV on to listen to the TV, go back and shower. And my mom lived in Indianapolis now. She moved from Brazil to Indianapolis. She worked at a school called DePaul University with a W. But so I would drive about 2 miles after I shower, and I would get my staple breakfast. And my staple breakfast was cinnamon rolls. It was like those Pillsbury, they would come in a package of 8.
Oh, yeah.
Good as shit. I would get those. Yeah. I'd eat every one of them. This is my staple breakfast, a half a pound of bacon, about 7 or 8. Now, don't forget, I said a large chocolate milkshake and a box of mini donuts, all right? So this is just a couple hours later. 7 or 8 scrambled eggs, hard and dry. And my favorite cereal, which was a Fruity Pebbles or some kind of sugary cereal, I would chase it down with that. So before I was going over there for my staple breakfast, and I made $1,000 a month during, at this time in my life. And I lived in an $800 a month place. And I won't tell you how I pulled that off. So I'm taking my shower, getting ready to go to my mom's house for my staple breakfast, and the TV comes on. And I'm hearing this guy talk about world's toughest training. I heard Navy SEAL. I heard Hell Week. I heard these snippets as I'm in the shower. And I knew that my job in the Air Force that I was trying to go for in pararescue was a special operations job also. And, I was familiar with the SEALs, but I wasn't real familiar with them. I knew they were supposed to be some badass men. So I came out of the shower, turned the shower off, walked out in a towel that could barely fit my fat ass, and sat on the couch, and I started watching these guys going through training. And I started watching nothing but water, man. These guys were going in and out of the fucking ocean. And I'd never been in the fucking ocean before. And the ocean looked scary as hell, man. I was afraid of the water. And these waves were coming over these guys' heads, and they were coming out of the water. They were jackhammering, which is jackhammering is shaking uncontrollably because you're cold as hell. And I hated being cold. And I saw these guys in the pool, and they were passing out underwater, doing 50 meter underwater. And these different instructors were, reviving them. All this kind of stuff was going on, man. And these guys were quitting and ringing the bell. And at the end of the story, or at the end of this, it's like only 20 minutes. It wasn't very long. At the end of it, it brought you from phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, all the phases of Navy SEAL training. I believe there was 22 guys left. And this commanding officer was delivering the graduation speech, and he was up there, and he said some words. Once again, it's that 2 minutes and 13 seconds, He said these words that kind of stuck in my head. He said, "We live in a society where mediocrity is often rewarded." And it talked about those men who were graduating and how the Navy SEALs detest mediocrity. And I sat there on that couch being fat and out of shape and shit, and being exactly what my dad and people said I would be, whatever I said I would be. Like I said at the beginning of this conversation, the most important conversation is one you have with yourself. And I realized I was exactly what I was telling myself I was going to be, which was a loser. And I said, I once again, man, I got to get that Rocky DVD out, or when a DVD was a VHS tape, and start watching Rocky, round 1 or round 14, round 1. Try to find my inspiration, try to find something to get me back up. I decided to, at almost 300 pounds, to try to be a Navy SEAL. I couldn't even run down the street. I couldn't even walk pretty much, man. I was just a big power lifter.
I love that first run. I think you ran like a mile and then you walked back and you finished your chocolate shake, something like that.
Yeah, I actually ran a quarter mile. Yeah, so anyway, I went through for 2 weeks trying to find different recruiters to accept me in. And I went to one recruiter named Steven Saljo, and I had to lose a lot of weight real quick, like 106 pounds in less than 3 months, which is impossible. That's what I thought. It's impossible. So I got my chocolate milkshake. I love chocolate milkshakes. I got my chocolate milkshake and left and went back to work at Ecolab, and I was spraying down this restaurant. And to cut to the chase, I was spraying for cockroaches at this restaurant, and I was never really looking for cockroaches, man. I would kind of go in the restaurant, eat their food, spray a little bit, and walk the hell out, and sign it off like I did it. And so in this restaurant, I happened to do a little bit of work, and I found a lot of cockroaches. I found a lot of everything. So I decided to quit my job that day. I said, I'm done with this shit. And on the drive home, I said, I'm going to start training to lose this weight. I'm going to lose 106 pounds. And I said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to run 4 miles. So I'm driving home and I get to the house and I put my shoes on and I got down the stairs and I take off. And when I take off down to run 4 miles, I get to what I think is at least a mile, and I'm exhausted, man. I am exhausted. So I walk home, and come to find out it was a quarter of a mile. And I'm like, my God, man. So I sit on the couch, and I won't go too deep into it, man, but I'm starting to tear up. I'm crying. It's miserable for me, man. I'm realizing this is my entire life. This is exactly where I'm going to be at my entire life. And every day, I just kept showing up. I just kept showing up every day. I would feel like shit, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I just feel beat down. And I started remembering that one scene from round 14. This is how I'm supposed to feel. This is how it's supposed to look. It's supposed to be like this. I'm supposed to be battered. I'm supposed to be bruised. I'm supposed to be beaten. This is how it's supposed to look, man. This is how, and then my mindset started slowly changing to, it's supposed to look like a flower garden, a rose garden, to, no, man. It's supposed to look like a fucking sewer. It's supposed to be hard, man. It's supposed to be grimy. It's supposed to be gritty. It's supposed to be horrible. It's supposed to be really ugly. And the more my mind changed, the more I thought to myself, no, I'm supposed to fail. This is how I'm going to grow. And the more that changed, the more my reality changed, the more my mindset changed, the more my life changed, the more I started to accept the fact that, I can take a lot of pain. And I started looking at my life as the ultimate training ground to where I wanted to go. So I was starting to develop this indestructible toolbox along this path.
You have an absolutely insane ability to decide you want something and then go and make it happen. Do you think that, and a lot of people go through pain, they go through traumatic events, and they feel this same sense of motivation that you felt over and over in your life. And most people are not able to follow through with achieving their goals. And do you think it has anything to do with kind of what you were saying about people think it should look like a flower garden? It should be easy. They should always feel motivated. Whereas you saw it as, I should fail. I should get knocked down. It should be messy. Do you think there's something to that?
Oh yeah, there's definitely something. Well, I know for a fact there's something to that. And that's where I disconnect with a lot of people. A lot of people, they don't know my entire story, and they think I was born this man that they see now. They see what was created. They see the end of the job.
Right.
So they didn't see what it took to get there. And to develop a man like this, I realized that, like to sharpen a sword, to make a sword, you have to put it through fire. And you have to beat the fucking shit out of it. Repeatedly, you have to beat the living shit out of it. And so my mindset started to become that. And I realized that nothing hard comes from soft. And so when people have that mindset of I failed, it determines how you look at that. I started looking at that as a whole different way of living. Like, how many people could do what you do, David? It's that internal conversation I started having that was motivating me. Like, I knew where I came from. I was like, but I knew where I was going. Like, how many people can come from your fucked up background? You couldn't even read. And then I put myself in a deeper hole. So all this was inspiring me. All this fucked up shit was inspiring me. Like, I went from a guy who couldn't read, who got beat, who got called a nigger, who got called all these things growing up. His dad beat the soul out of him. But I was 175 pounds. Now I'm almost 300 pounds. I'm in a worse hole. But it's going to make for an even better story at the end of all this shit. So I started turning all these conversations into power. All the failure, all the rocky moments that we have in life, they're so powerful to say, what if I can get up and make this turn out to be what I want it to be? I have a way with visualizing. I have a way of visualizing and talking to myself and finding great strength in great misery. And it's those people who are able to be in the fucking sewer. It's very easy to be motivated on those good days of life. It's that cat who can be at the bottom of the sewer, who can find great motivation alone. There's no coach, there's no trainer, there's no nothing. There's no mom, dad, sister, cousin, brother, wife, husband. It's you and you alone in the worst possible spot of your life. If you can find drive, determination, motivation in those times alone, you figured it out. And we have it all in our minds. It's how you talk to yourself and how you visualize coming out of it. It's how you see yourself in the dungeon of life. Many of us can't find strength there, but there's so much strength in the dungeon because so many people just stay there. It's that motherfucker who's willing to come out of it that becomes glorious at the end of it all.
I think that's one of the most inspiring parts of your story. This message that if you like of sharpening the sword, of developing yourself into the type of person you want to be, rather than having to be born with innate abilities. You sharpened yourself. You made yourself into the person that you are today, which is the toughest man alive. That's amazing. So then you go on to, and guys, I'm going to skip over a lot of this because we can't do the entire story justice. You got to read the book. It's incredible. You go on to become a Navy SEAL. You go through BUD/S 3 times. I think it was due to injuries the first couple times, correct?
Right. So I'm the only person in Navy SEAL history to go through to be in 3 hell weeks in 1 year. The first one, real quick on that, got injured. I actually graduated the next 2. So I actually finished the next 2 hell weeks. But I was going through BUD/S at a time frame that if you got injured at any time, and you missed too much of training, they would roll you back to day 1, week 1. Mm-hmm. So after my second hell week, after I got through my second hell week, I fractured my patella and had to start back from day 1, week 1. In my third hell week, as you're familiar with it, we had a guy die in that hell week. I graduated Navy SEAL training and went on to become a Navy SEAL. So yeah, it was 3 times.
And you had just about as successful of a career in the military as one could have. And you became the only person in history to do BUD/S, which is SEAL training, then Ranger training, which is people put it almost up there with buds. And then you did Air Force tactical controller training. You're the only person in the history of the military to do that. You were at the absolute pinnacle of the military in the world. Why did you end up leaving the military?
You know what? I did 21 years, and it's time to do something different. The military was everything in my life. Loved it. Loved everything about it. It's just, I'm the kind of person that you don't want to be known, like you start to be known as a Navy SEAL, and I want to be known as David Goggins. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be known as Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, Ultra Runner. Those are all kind of my titles, Guinness Book of World Record. That's what I'd be known as. This guy was a Navy SEAL. Not only was he a SEAL, he went to Ranger School. He tried out for, I tried out for Delta Force twice. I went through all these different things, done all these ultra races, did the pull-up record, and now I'm a wildland firefighter. I don't want to be known as just one title. I want to be known that, hey, you know what? There's so much to say about this fucking guy. He's just David Goggins. Yeah, that just puts it very simple. So that's one reason why I got out, because now I'm 43. There's so much more to do in my life.
It's badass, man. So you get out and you're restless, and of course you have to do something so extreme. And you're run. One of my favorite stories of the whole book is you running 100 times around a 1 mile track. What on earth would possess you to do that?
Now, so when I started my running career, I was actually still in the military. So, Operation Red Wings. People who don't know it, it's the movie Lone Survivor, or the book Lone Survivor. Just real quick on that, it was one of the worst incidents in SEAL history. 4 guys were doing an operation. The operation went wrong. They got rolled up on. 3 of the guys got killed. Marcus Luttrell was the only survivor. Marcus Luttrell is a good buddy of mine. And the other 3 guys that died were also good buddies of mine. A quick reaction force came in, a QRF team came in to save them. They got blown from the sky. They all died. I knew a lot of those guys in the chopper. I was at military freefall school, which is where you jump out of airplanes from 12,000, 13,000, 20,000, 30,000 feet, and you free fall down until you pull your parachute. I was there with Marcus Luttrell's twin brother, Morgan Luttrell, who was also a Navy SEAL. He went through buds later than Marcus at a different time frame, but he was there when I was there also. So I was the person that had to tell Morgan that his brother might be dead. Marcus was the only person that ended up living on the operation. When I told Morgan that his brother might be dead, he looked at me and said, "Nah, he's alive. They're twins." And that whole twin thing, I guess, is true. He didn't feel like Marcus was that Marcus was dead. 4 days later, he got the word, he got the call that Marcus was alive. That story touched me so much. And by this time, I was about 250 pounds. I gained a lot of weight back. I wasn't fat. I became a big bodybuilder, big time into this lifting weights real heavy, but no cardio. I wasn't big into cardio at all. I did the elliptical trainer for 20 minutes every Sunday is all I did. So basically, I heard about this and I was like, man, I want to raise some money for these guys for, whatever I could do. So I found a foundation called the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, where you pretty much, if you are a special operator and you died over in the war or died in training, died anytime, they would pay 100% tuition for your kid to go to school. So I said, that's a great foundation. How am I going to raise money for this foundation? So I Googled the 10 hardest events in the world. And what came up was this race called the Badwater 135. I had no idea what the hell it was. It was number 1 on the hardest thing to do list. So I got a contact number for the race director. I started talking to him, and I thought this was a race over a period of time, like a stage race. It's a 135-mile run through Death Valley in the summertime. So 125 degrees, whatever, 135 miles. So I thought it was over a period of time. So I called the race director up, and make a long story short, he said, you got to qualify for it. I go, how do you qualify? He goes, you have to do 100 miles in less than 24 hours. And there was only 2 races left I could do to qualify. I called this guy up on a Wednesday, and one of the races was in San Diego where I lived, called the San Diego One Day, where you run around a 1-mile track for 24 hours to see how many miles you can get. And he said, if you can do 100 miles, I will consider you. Key word there is consider. I will consider you for my race. So I'm like, okay, you know what, man? You know, it's 14-some minute mile. I can walk that. So 3.5 days later, having zero training as far as cardiovascular goes, I'm out on this 1-mile track to do 100 laps, to get 100 miles. And this becomes literally still to this day, the worst pain, suffering, mental torture. It destroys buds, destroys Ranger School, destroys anything I've ever done in my life. This 19 hours becomes the worst 19 hours of my entire fucking life. And to sum it up, to go out there on a flat track, you know, I've done several 100-mile races now where I've run, 30,000. I've climbed over 30,000 feet through a 100-mile race. And this had zero climbing. Maybe it had a little, maybe 7-foot climb. Like, you can't even notice it for most ultra runners. That little pitch that was in this became like a mountain to me at like mile 50. And I describe it really well in the book. But just to cut to the chase, man, I get to mile 70. I was pretty much living off of Ritz crackers and Mileplex. My feet are broken. I'm just so destroyed. I am just jacked up. And I can't even describe it enough right now, but I describe it really well in the book, really well. I'm sitting there, and I'm married at the time, and she's now my ex-wife, and I look like death. I just look like death, and I end up pretty much not being able to make it to the porta potty. I'm shitting up my back. I'm peeing blood down my leg. I'm in the worst shape of my entire life. And I have a long way to go, like 30 miles to go. And I won't get too deep into it, man, but that next 30 miles ends up, once again, really, 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 really changing my life and my mentality for the rest of my life. I realized, even going through being in 3 hell weeks, Ranger School, all that shit, I realized, my God, this is where I started to develop this, through all this book and stuff like that. I started talking about this 40% rule, but I started realizing how much I would leave on the table when I was at what I thought was my 100%. I wasn't anywhere near it. And this story that I talk about in the book really lets me realize that how much we leave on the table due to pain, insecurity, fear, and fear of suffering. Fear of suffering. And I'm not telling anybody at all to do what I did in this book, especially in this story, especially in a lot of these stories. A lot of these stories, I go to a very deep spot in my mind to pull off a lot of stuff. But in this 100-mile race, I realized that the human mind is truly unbelievable.
You use this term, callousing your mind, and it sounds like over the course of years, especially going through all of the different trainings you went through, you had just developed such a calloused, strong mindset that it's really not surprising that you could pull something like that off. And what you're saying about your 40% rule, right, where we think we're at 100%, but we really have so much more, that really resonates with me. I don't know if you've heard of this event called SEAL Fit, but it's a bunch of former SEALs that put it on, and I've done it a couple times. And after about 4 or 5 hours, the fittest person and the least fit person in the group are all on a level playing field, because they just put out what they thought was 100% of their effort for 4 or 5 hours straight, and then we have another 45 hours. And I learned that same exact thing, that the difference between what makes people successful and unsuccessful is almost entirely between the mind. The physical is only going to get you too far. And when you're trying to accomplish something big, the mind is the primary mover.
Yeah, it's true, man. I have a whole bunch of stuff talking about that also in my book about you have to be able to break this very big thing into very small pieces. And what makes people quit, stuff like you talked about, the whole SEAL Fit thing and different challenges like Hell Week and Ranger School and 100-mile races and stuff like that is, like, for instance, I ran 205 miles in 39 hours. Can you imagine what your mind is thinking at mile 100 of a 205-mile race? It's not thinking you're halfway done. It's thinking you have another 100 miles to go.
Right.
It's not thinking, oh, man, we're halfway down. It's thinking, oh, man, fuck, I got a long way to go. And so you have to be able to really chunk these things down and not allow your mind to get away from you at the worst times. So I became an expert at doing just that.
So I want to finish by talking about a few kind of mindset tools and tactics that you have in the book. You were and still are really big on self-talk. And at some point you started telling yourself that you're a bad motherfucker. For those listening, how can you tell yourself you're a bad motherfucker if you don't think you've endured anything, if there's no evidence that you're a bad motherfucker?
Well, this is the thing about it, man. Even though my life gave me a lot of challenges, so people say, oh, well, how can I become hard if my dad didn't beat me, if I didn't stutter, if I wasn't called names, if I wasn't bullied, if I didn't endure all the things you endured? Yeah, all those things can make you a hard motherfucker, or they can make you very soft. I made a choice, and those things didn't make me hard. I had to find strength within them. Where I became hard was the discipline the self-discipline. Key word is self. Discipline is great. Self-discipline makes you a master of yourself because no one is helping you. That's where you really start to callous your mind. You callous your mind not through enduring a hard childhood or a hard life. It's enduring the things that make you uncomfortable, which is we all have this list in our head of the things that we want to stay very clear of. Some of us are afraid of heights. Some of us are afraid of getting up early. Some of us are afraid of cold water. Some of us are afraid of going to college. Whatever it may be, we have this list that we are staying very clear of. You need to get that fucking list, put it in front of you, and start making that list the only list you go from. And during this list is how you start to create the calloused mind. You're never going to be able to callous your mind by going to this magical list in the golden tool shed that makes you feel all comfortable and fuzzy inside. There's no callous there. Like, I did 4,030 pull-ups in 17 hours to break the Guinness Book of World Records for most pull-ups. In that time period, I did 67,000 pull-ups in 9 months. 67,000 pull-ups in 9 months. What happens to your hands is they become calloused. Calluses protect your hands against that hard, nasty, gritty ass bar that you're going to touch thousands and thousands of times. You have to do that to your mind. Your mind has to touch hardship. It has to be uncomfortable. It has to be put in a situation where it's forced to grow. If you're never forcing your mind to grow, there's no calluses. Calluses will never start to grow. So it starts there.
You've got 10 exercises in the book that are just ways for people to sharpen their mind, to callous their minds. And number one is one about writing about your past. Why is this important for people to do?
Well, you have to own it, man. Like for me right now, I talked here, we've been on here for an hour and 10 minutes. And this isn't about kissing my own ass. This isn't about look at me, look how great I am, I'm amazing. You have to really be honest with yourself. And the one thing I was very fearful of was being honest with myself. I was the world's best liar. So you had to go back into that nasty past of your life to fix it. You have to be willing to talk about your past. I'm not saying on the platform that I'm doing it on, but I'm saying that you have to own it. And until you own your past and own the fact that no, a lot of your past didn't come from you. A lot of past may come from your mom, your dad. You may have a drug addiction, alcohol addiction. You may have been sexually abused, mentally abused, physically abused, whatever it comes from, bullied, whatever. It's now yours, man. No one's coming to help you. No one's coming to save you. It is now yours to own. And you have to find the courage to face that. And that's why I talk so much about the past. And you have to stop being afraid of what other people think about you. You have to stop being afraid of being judged. Stop being afraid of what people are going to think about you once they know who you are, know where you come from, know what you've struggled with, know your journey. You got to stop, man, because I tell you right now, those people who are judging you have also been through fucked up shit. They just do a better job of hiding it. Mm-hmm. They just don't want to talk about it. So no matter who you're talking to, no matter who's hearing this, I know for a fact that every one of you out there has a past. Every one of you out there has lied. Every one of you out there is not perfect. Every one of you is hiding behind something. And once you come out from hiding, you can start fixing yourself.
Yeah, and the only way to move past it is to first understand, like really look at what you've been through and to share it with other people. That's when it really starts to lose its power over you. I love that, man. So through reading your book, I noticed that whenever and we talked about this a little bit earlier, whenever you decided you wanted something, you just took massive action and you made a massive change. And I was wondering how other people could kind of tap into that. And at the end of the book, you answered that question. And you use this analogy that the engine in a rocket ship does not fire without a small spark first. And you talk about the importance of small sparks or small accomplishments. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm really big on kindling. Kindling, a lot of forest fires, man, they don't start you don't light a big ass tree on fire. A big ass tree is like a 10,000 hour fuel. You start a forest fire, man, by lighting a little piece of brush, a little piece of kindling. It starts by a guy throwing a little cigarette, just a little spark starts a fire that burns up hundreds of thousands of acres. And I started realizing that, man. And we all are looking for that big 10,000 hour fuel. You're only looking for that 1 hour fuel. You're only looking for that 1 hour fuel. A lot of us are trying to just ignite the whole forest on fire immediately. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to find these little sparks. All I need is a 1 hour fuel, 1 hour fuel, 1 hour fuel. I'm looking for the kindling. 1 hour fuel, 1 hour fuel, 1 hour fuel. Before you know it, man, those 1 hour fuels, that one bush that burns for an hour is right by that 10,000 hour tree. Mm-hmm. And that bush starts to set those logs on fire, those sticks, them bigger sticks, them much bigger sticks. Then before you know it, man, you got that 10,000 hour log that is burning for days. And then that whole forest is burning. What I'm getting at is don't burn the whole forest down at one time. Look for these small sparks that just keep you going throughout the day. Don't set, when I lost 106 pounds, I lost it fast. But I was happy when I lost a pound. I took great pride in the fact that I was on the right path. And I also took pride in the fact that when I hit those plateaus, I took pride in the fact that I wasn't leaving my journey. I was always finding strength in all the negatives and positives that I hit. I never allowed the fire to go out. I never allowed the storm to come in, the weather to come in and put the flame completely out. And I'm not saying that I didn't have a whole bunch of fucking bad days, but I kept the at least keep the 1 hour fuel burning.
Mm-hmm.
Once the 1 hour fuel is out, nothing else can catch and ignite. So I realized that I had a whole bunch of days. I failed more times than I could fucking count to set these goals, these lofty goals that I have. That's why the majority of this book talks about me falling on my fucking ass, because that's what happened. But I always kept the fire burning, even in the biggest depressions of my life. I kept a what if and a hopeful mentality of tomorrow will bring another fucking day for me to succeed. But today, I'm in the suck of life. So that's kind of what the whole mentality is about.
Yeah, it's an incredible analogy, and it sounds just like it sounds just like the best way to instill and maintain habits, right? You don't want to start with 100 different habits at once. You want to start with one, make that automatic, then go to 2, and before you know it, you're doing 100, and they're just a part of who you are. But if you start with 100, most people just fail that. Most people can't adhere to all of that at one time. So start small, build from there. That's great, man.
Exactly.
You talk a lot about wanting to move people from motivated to driven. What does that mean?
So, when I was growing up, I realized that a lot of things would motivate me, like the round 14 of Rocky, man. Oh my God, there it is, man. I'm so motivated. Motivation only lasts for so long. And I call motivation crap because it only lasts for so long. Motivation is just that kindling. But basically, that motivation can get put out by a storm real quick. And a storm in our minds can be paying bills, your wife or husband on your fucking nerves, your kids being sick, or your job getting at you, or you're not losing weight fast enough, or you failed a test. All these things that life bring you can totally bring the storm of life and put that 1 hour of fuel out. And that's motivation. A lot of people who are hearing this right now might get motivated from my story or something I said, and they may want to go out and start running. And they may put their running shoes on, and they may make it to a quarter of a mile like I did the first time. And at a quarter mile, you may be fucking winded and extremely exhausted. And you may never want to run again. And your motivation may be gone because it hurt real bad. But a lot of you who are hearing this will go way beyond motivated, and they will find a drive and a passion and an inspiration and an obsession. And when you start saying words like obsession and drive, you become a person that many people don't understand who you are anymore. You become a person that people want to put a title on of you're crazy, or you're just, what's wrong with you, because they can't understand what is driving you. Many people in this world don't have the kind of drive to push them through things that are extremely painful. And that's why I talk about motivation and drive so much, is that you want to be a person that life doesn't get in the way of what you have to accomplish. When you're motivated, life will put that kindling out, and you will lose the spark, and you will go right back down to your pathetic life. When you're driven, you're living off of that big fucking log in the woods that has that 10,000 hour fuel that burns for days and hours, and it keeps burning and burning and burning. So that's what drive is about, man. And you want to get to a point where no matter if you haven't paid your bills, if you don't have the right money, if your job's fucked up, if life's fucked up, you still do what you have to do to succeed in life. And that's what it's about.
Badass, man. Yeah, and that motivation, it seems to come from some kind of external source, where it's a person or video or some music or something like that. And drive, I think, comes from us taking action and starting to believe in ourselves more and having goals that we feel driven to accomplish.
Exactly.
David, this has been phenomenal, man. Is there anything else you want to leave this audience with?
No, man, I think I bored them enough. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's been great, man. Guys, if you like what you've heard today, please pick up his book. It is called Can't Hurt Me. David, You're the man. Where can people find you and where can they buy this book?
I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. It's just pretty much at David Goggins. It was, at David Goggins. The book I self-published. I turned down $300,000 from a top 5 publishing house to self-publish because my life, in which you just heard, I couldn't give it to somebody. So basically, you can find it on Amazon. There'll be an audio version of it. There's a hardcover, paperback, ebook. It's all out there on Amazon, man. So you can find it. It comes out December 4th. I appreciate it, man.
You're the man. Thank you, David. Hey guys, I get asked a lot what our most downloaded podcasts are because we have almost 200 shows recorded and people don't want to take the time to sift through and find the best ones. They want to know what's the best one in X, Y, or Z category. And so what I did is created a little document of the top 5 most downloaded shows, and we put a little write-up with each one of them. So each one of them comes with a high-level overview of what the show is about, as well as some of the biggest actionable items, like the biggest takeaways from each show. And you can get free access to this by going to brutestrengthtraining.com/TOP5. That's top 5. brutestrengthtraining.com/top 5. So it's the top 5 most downloaded podcast, as well as the biggest takeaways for each. Enjoy.
This episode is finished, but your training journey continues. Head over to brutestrengthtraining.com/SSW and grab your free pack of 32 accessory workouts that you can incorporate into your training and start improving your strength immediately. That's brutestrengthtraining.com/SSW.